The first rule of weaving is do not remove an unwoven warp from the loom. The second rule of weaving is do not remove an unwoven warp from the loom. The third rule of weaving is that someday you will be foolish enough to remove an unwoven warp from the loom. I shall explain. While searching for supplies, I came across a project from many, many moons ago. Years. I believe more than a decade. Anyway, I pulled it out to evaluate. Were the yarns still any good? I remember starting this project. I remember being supremely frustrated. I have the vaguest of recollection of hiding it away so I could think about what it had done. The problem was this. It was still early in my weaving experience. I was in way over my head. Now, being over my head is nothing new to me. I do it regularly. One might say I feel unfulfilled if I haven't tortured myself periodically. I want to say it was a combination of frustration, a new shiny project idea, and moving the loom to another space. Despite the first two rules of weaving, it is possible to remove an unwoven warp. You need forethought, planning, excellent records, hopefully somebody standing by to administer smelling salts. It's safe to say I didn't have any of those. I did know what I had planned to make. I had instructions from two different projects I was clearly mashing together, and a page of my notes. Two different projects. And my extensive, helpful notes. The problems with my notes are many. One of which is I have the handwriting of a doctor or a serial killer. Another major problem is my belief that what I'm writing down is perfectly clear and I will understand exactly what I meant by all of the sentence fragments, arrows, circles, and underlining. Spoiler alert, I don't. So I unrolled the mess and took stock. I figured out how many yarns per inch I had planned, and therefore how wide the project would be. I took a rough measurement of the length. I went back to my notes, applied my head to the desk repeatedly, and came to the conclusion that back then I had my head up my ass and no clue what I was doing. So then followed a painful, no, not really, distressing, disheartening period of time where I ensured that I had every yarn in 2 layers. Did I not mention this is double cloth? 2 layers. Both layers alternating colors. And the knots were all level, so I could have a better idea of exactly how long I had. And as I knew from my head bashing, there was no way that this was going to be long enough to weave as I had intended, even if I'd done it then and not taken it off the loom. So how do you extend a warp? You tie on extensions. I'm very fortunate. My current loom has much less loom waste than previous, but it still has waste. So I tied an extension to pairs of warp yarns and created my threading cross while I was there. And then I meticulously combed and straightened the full length of the warp to measure the shortest length. What would be my maximum weaving length? I swapped out a couple extremely short ones or damaged yarns, and then I was ready to dress the loom. I will not inflict upon you the tedium of spacing, combing, winding, threading. You must trust me when I tell you you don't want to know. And then followed the tying and tensioning and error checking and all of that. But finally, blazing shuttles, that moment has arrived. I filled my bobbins. I started weaving, trying to do 2 separate layers, following the instructions for that. I will be honest, it did not go as smoothly as I would have liked. Then, having decided that 2 layers was not enough of a challenge, I decided to alternate my weft yarns through the colors like I did in the warp. 3 colors total, one of them used twice. So royal turquoise, royal purple, royal turquoise, royal purple. If you're keeping track, that meant that I would need 4 bobbins for each layer of fabric, going back and forth. I would like to make it clear, I could have done it. It would have taken me approximately 238 years, but I could have done it. Fortunately, for all concerned, I decided that it was looking too plaid and returned to a single weft color. And then after a pause, while I waited for more yarn to arrive, because I did the math wrong in the beginning, I continued happily weaving away. What we're looking at is shed 1 bottom layer, first shuttle, shed 1 top layer, second shuttle, straighten out the selvages, shed 2 bottom layer, first shuttle, shed 2 top layer, second shuttle, straighten out the edges. If only it were this fast. So a real-time circuit of this sequence was about 40 seconds. And that's when everything went as it should. And that doesn't include having to adjust the selvage guides or anything else. And here's where the magic happens. Cutting the warp threads and using them as weft. So the warp thread from the upper layer gets used as weft in the lower layer, and the warp thread from the lower layer gets used as weft in the upper layer. And that creates the diagonal for the V-shawl. All right, now the project is done, and I absolutely love it. However, mistakes were made, and I will share them with you so that you might avoid them. In no particular order. First, when calculating how much more weft I needed, I did not take into account the fact that the warp from one layer would become the weft on the other layer. So I ordered more than I needed. Not a problem, as I will happily use it in another project. Second, when I reached the V portion of the weaving, I did not pay attention to how tightly I was beading my weft. I was just going for secure. And therefore, I packed it way tighter than the rest of the weaving. So rather than square, plaid-ish effect, I've got rectangles. I can live with that. It's also a little warbly. but I, washed it, blocked it, still looks good. And then, of course, when you're wearing it, the warbles pretty much disappear because you got wrinkles going on all over the place. Third, I forgot how incredibly squirrely chenille yarn can be. On these lovely two straight edges, I should not have undone the weaving until after I'd washed and dried it. Would have kept it all contained, which is what I normally do with my weaving, but I didn't this time. Such is life. On the not mistake, but could be improved side, the ribbon yarn doesn't get to shine as is. If I were doing this again, I would maybe put the yarn on a different shaft so that it could maybe float above and below the fabric like a long basting stitch, with obviously anchored sections, or set it in the reed with some extra space on either side. I've done that with other things. And then, of course, if I go with this would absolutely be a pain in the butt and drive me crazy, but be fabulous option. I've been thinking about doing yarns that kind of, like Tron, maybe 3 of them that crisscross, and yeah, it would be fabulous. I'm not sure about doing it on 2 layers at the same time. I don't know. But anyhow, it's a thought. So there we go. It is definitely wider than it needed to be. I think I was just thinking of the one side because I like my shawls very wide, but this is definitely a little more than it needed to be. And the length is good this way, but if I want to do one of these things, I need more length, which would be easier to work with if it wasn't as wide. If it was, say, half as wide, that would make a really nice, and it wouldn't get too much in the way, and then I could, do one of these things, and that would be good. So, those are the thoughts. If I do it again, we know I will at some point. I definitely will at some point. So those are the thoughts. If you happen to decide to do this project, or if you've done one and you did it successfully, I'd love to hear about it. I'd love to learn what you learned from it. But there we go. Little V shawl, finally finished after, a decade of languishing in the corner. And I'm really happy with it. And my mother's already tried to steal it.